In the course of doing this project, I decided to go home to my home island of Cape Breton. As we can see, we're going through Sydney River right now, and the reason why I wanted to get a good shot of going through Sydney River is I wanted you to see that this is where we lived. And it's interesting that such a small town we kind of took it for granted that we had a little film community going on, and it started with the time frame that I've included for this project in 1981 with My Bloody Valentine. With this particular film, it was truly eye-opening for the time that it came out because it was coming out at a time when slasher films were making their way onto the big screen and they were focusing on dates. The reason why this became so prevalent in our own community was because it was related to miners. Much of Cape Breton culture is related to the mining culture. We had mines in Sydney mines where My Bloody Valentine was primarily shot, but we also had the Glace Bay mines, we had the Dominion mines, we had Donkin mines. This was our main source of industry, and this film just beautifully captured that. You can see that the cars and everything that was going on in 1981, but this was Cape Breton life in 1981. If you were a miner, you were like this. You were getting off work every day. You were um, hopefully going to an event afterwards, which many people would be excited about because literally this was a small town where nothing happened. They captured this in this film beautifully. The mines that this film was shot in, sadly, they are currently closed. You can still see the remains when you do go through Sydney Mines. I was hoping to get some video shots of that. Unfortunately, there was too much decay, and due to the weather, I just didn't feel comfortable going around there. But most of the businesses that were used in this film are also still open, and a good chunk of the background cast, they are still locals and still live there. This film definitely put Cape Breton on the map for the slasher industry. And when I look at groups that are on Facebook, a lot of people get excited when you tell them, yes, I'm from Sydney Mines. And then they're like, oh, My Bloody Valentine was shot there. So this was one of the first big films that put Cape Breton on the map in terms of the film industry. This didn't put Canada's East Coast on the map. We already had a high film industry at this point, but most of it was being shot in Halifax, New Brunswick, and even Newfoundland. Cape Breton isn't usually a place where people go to shoot film just because we're more of an isolated community. And even this hall here, this is actually still open to the public. And the first time I had actually seen this film with friends, we all got excited because we all recognized that hall. We all went there for birthday parties and such. In this particular scene right here, we see that the girls are actually down in the physical mine. They actually did do shoots down there in the actual Sydney Mines mine, which is now currently closed to anyone. It's too dangerous to go down there. However, there is a mine that is open in Glace Bay that allows people to go down there every year, and they dress up as the villain for My Bloody Valentine. This film captured the, how shall we say, the more fun side of being a miner in Cape Breton, but the film that captured the darker side of being a miner was definitely Margaret's Museum. Unfortunately, I couldn't get film clips, so I just put in stills. In this particular film, we look at the dangers of being a minor, which would often include a family member getting sick with black lung. All of the houses that are currently being filmed there, they were only recently torn down, but they ended up with black lung. They would end up getting sick, or there would be a bump that would happen, and we would lose loved ones. Margaret's Museum was based off of Sheldon Curry's book, The Glace Bay Miners Museum, which definitely captured Cape Breton life in terms of being a miner. In this next film, we look at the Bay Boy. Once again, we see parts of mining's communities, but this film more or less focused on the religious aspect that was in Cape Breton culture and how important it was for families to have their children become priests and nuns, just because it was a highly Catholic community. And there really wasn't too many options for the young folks at the time. They had to either become a miner or become part of the religious sector, which I can honestly say from personal experience, my husband, his aunt, she grew up in Dominion, and her options were to become a nurse, like his grandmother, or to become a teacher, like his other aunt. And she decided to become a nun and a teacher. These were the limited options of Cape Breton at the time, especially if you were a woman and you wanted to do more than just become a mother. Once again, most of the homes that are within this shot within this film, they are actually still standing today. A lot of the miners' homes that we saw a little bit earlier, they have since been torn down just because the actual physical mines in Glace Bay, they're actually starting to become sinkholes and the houses are actually starting to collapse. So a lot of these films are actually quick glimpses into what our communities used to look like because some of them don't look like this anymore. Um, these films were significant to us because it definitely captured our mining culture and our religious culture. The newest film that actually captured our more religious side and extracurricular side was New Waterford Girl. And also it captured how much many young locals, how much they wanted to get off the island. Um, we do have a very close community in Cape Breton, not just in the small rural communities. It's not a joke to say that the most common line is, "What's your father's name?" or as the actual line is, "What's your father's name?" It's not unusual to hear that because there's literally 2 degrees of separation within Cape Breton. In this particular scene, we see at the same time there is a wedding going on and a funeral going on. Unfortunately, in Cape Breton, that's happened more than once, which is culturally distinctive to us, as well as it wasn't unusual for 7 or 8 people to be in the same house in this time period, which was the 70s. And the main character in this film, she has an opportunity to go forward in her life and get a scholarship and get out of Cape Breton, which is what many families would have both wanted and not wanted at the same time because, like I said, we were such a close-knit community. We didn't want our families to move away. And because if you usually move away in Cape Breton, you usually don't come back. Despite the close-knit communities, there is not a lot of industry. It started going downhill in the 1970s. And these films truly start capturing that. We start seeing men staying home. Well, why are they staying home? Well, there's no industry, there's barely any work. And my grandfather, who I would have loved to have interviewed, and I was planning on it, but unfortunately, due to circumstances, I could not. But I was able to speak to him over the phone. And I did ask him, what was it like in Cape Breton at this time period? And he said, well, the steel plant was in and out of work, and this film truly does capture that. The dad is around quite a bit, um, because there was a lack of industry at this point. Eventually, we would get the heavy water plant, but that wouldn't be until the 80s, and that also shut down, and so did our coal mines. They eventually shut down as well. Um, I have no doubt if the Cape Breton film industry continues to go forward, they will definitely explore those aspects of our culture. Once again, here we see the religious side that is within the Cape Breton community. Uh, Most of the communities were Roman Catholic. The other half was most likely Protestant. We don't have a huge other aspect of a religious community, or we didn't until the last 10 years, where we had many international students coming into CBU. This next part is actually another part of our culture, which was fighting. It's a subculture that not many people know about. We are actually very heavy into our fighting culture, particularly in regards into boxing. We usually don't bring it up too much, but it's definitely prevalent in there, and it's definitely represented within this film. And it kind of made a feminine stance because it was a girl who was practicing boxing, and the girl who was trying to leave in this whole film was she was just a small town girl who wanted to do more for herself and see more of the world than just the tiny little island that is Cape Breton. This next shot is just a beautiful shot of leaving New Waterford. I was actually able to find it. It is truly nice. So this next one is The Legend of the Psychotic Forest Ranger. It was one of the first independent films in Cape Breton. The main actor, Michael McDonald, is actually a professor at CBU, and he was truly awesome. I couldn't get him interviewed, unfortunately, but I added a picture of me with him when I met him a few years ago. And the next part is people I interviewed about Cape Breton films. So enjoy. So, first question is based on the Cape Breton films. When watching the films, what stands out to you most in terms of relating to our culture on the island? Like, if you guys can remember anything.
Well, location, if they touch on the history, any of the buildings, and that's what I'd be looking for.
I think with like the My Bloody Valentine, it's somebody in your family was a miner, whether it's an uncle, a great grandfather, a grandfather, a father. We all know someone that was a miner. You're like watching it. You're like, it's not just like some old abandoned haunted house ghost story. You're like, you don't need to do much to make mines scary, and so you kind of put yourself like, oh my god, I don't know how men went down there and didn't like pee themselves.
Yeah.
without a killer being on the loose.
Well, exactly.
There was enough hidden killers in those mines without us adding one.
I won't ask you, Sam, this question because the film that you saw wasn't. We weren't even alive when it was filming. But do you remember them filming The Water Girl here? No, it was like. I hate to say this, but it's almost like it's not known when we do shoot movies in Cape Breton. Like, not many people knew they shot Frontier and Fortress of Lewisburg, and that had Jason Momoa in it.
It did. Yeah, we should. I think we shot a couple movies here.
We did, but like almost no one knew about it. Do you think that the films that were done here captured life in Cape Breton at all? Why or why not?
The one that I see, New Waterford Girl, I say it captured New Waterford, and that was really it, like New Waterford in that time frame. But it didn't touch on a lot of the history or anything in Cape Breton.
No, but they did talk about how everyone likes being in Sydney more than New Waterford.
Yes. Yes.
I don't think that like any film like touches on the history, like unless it's like a documentary. But it's certainly interesting because you recognize the buildings because Cape Breton doesn't change that often. All
Nope.
of the buildings are pretty much still standing. But also you're like there's a bar scene and you're like, yeah, that's like every bar in Cape Breton.
Yeah.
Even like and it's the way that people interact, or like there's not that many people your age at you, and who there is, you know them all. Like we're tiny enough that you're like 2 degrees of separation is a real thing.
Do you think that the My Bloody Valentine captured the mining culture that was going on at the time? Because, like, we were still alive when those mines were closed. Like, when they were closing. So they were still open when we were alive.
Yeah. It's hard to say because part of it you get like the managers usually weren't from around here, so they didn't care about necessarily, like they didn't have any connection to the men working in the mines, so they didn't necessarily care about safety.
No.
But there's also like I think for people in the mines, they do get a sense of humor. Like you have to keep some light air to your like, or else you're just gonna go insane down there.
Yeah.
So some of like the bickering, like you're like, okay, I could see like that.
Go on.
It'd be interesting to compare it to like any mining accident, like where it happened, and then what was it like 5 years later they were gonna have a dance on the day anyway. But I wonder like,
Would we have done that?
yeah, like with other big mining incidents, we don't have a lot of days that are set aside for like major, like the Westville, isn't it?
The Westray. Yeah, but every year with Westray, like, we don't do celebrations.
Anything. We don't do any like days of mourning or any like, it's not even taught in the schools. So I wonder if, as Cape Bretoners, we're just so accustomed to just like, yeah, mining incidents happened, we gloss over it. But then I do think, isn't it Glace Bay does, not Coal Dust Days, but what's the day they have off over there? There's a day Glace Bay specifically has off for a mining incident.
It's not day of mourning. I can't remember what it
But like
is.
their schools all get it off, and we wouldn't. So I'm wondering like how certain towns just either gloss over it or set aside a day.
I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Look that up, Jana.
I will. And finally, do you guys think there's hope for the Cape Breton film industry as time goes on?
Yes. Yes, I do. There's so many talented people here. It'd be crazy for anyone not to invest in it and spend time doing it. And
I wonder where we're so stuck in the past, if they're just going to come to Cape Breton to film like, look, life in the 80s. Everyone else will get like, you know, like,
They already did that with the Legend of the Psychotic Forest Ranger. All right. When watching the films, this is for the Cape Breton films, what stands out to you the most in terms of relating it to our culture in Cape Breton?
So when it comes to like any Cape Breton films I've seen, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, Miners Museum. It's semi-fictional, semi-fact. I mean, it's based a lot in truth, and yeah, I mean it's pretty accurate, I would say, for the mining period of the time, from what I've seen. What else am I thinking of? The New Waterford Girl. That's the other one I was thinking of. That one I would also say is pretty accurate for the times. I mean, there's some noofs in there, but they're they're Cape Bretoning it right up, I'd say.
Sounds about right. Do you remember any of these films being filmed, like New Waterford Girl, or
I have secondhand knowledge of New Waterford Girl and Miners Museum. I know people who ran into, um, oh my God, Tim Burton's wife, blanking on her name at the moment.
Helena Bonham Carter?
Thank you. People who ran into her when she was here. Yeah.
Do you think these films captured life in Cape Breton? Why or why not?
For the time period, they were both set. I think Miners Museum was set in the 50s or 60s, and the Waterford Girl was more like 70s, 80s. Early 80s, I think. And from everyone I know who was alive then, it certainly seems like they really captured the essence of what it was to be a Cape Bretoner at the time.
Which films out of the films you watched has the most Cape Breton feel to it, would you say?
I'd say The Waterford Girl. I'm sure there's other ones, but those are the two that are just popping into my head right now.
Do you think there's hope for the future of the Cape Breton film industry?
I hope so. I mean, I know we have a lot of talented people. It's just whether or not we can get funding to continue filming things.
So, first question. When watching the films, what stands out to you the most in terms of it relating to our culture in Cape Breton?
I only remember watching My Bloody Valentine. That's the one that stands out to me. But like you hear of like the other ones. But I feel like My Bloody Valentine was just the horror thing and not just specifically this is Cape Breton. But that's all I can think about.
But there are movies where it's so painfully Cape Breton. Like everything you would imagine is Cape Breton, everything that we associate with Cape Breton, it's like they've included every single element. We were just looking at Murder's Museum and it's like, that is Cape Breton. And I think they did that because it's very much like that's what people associate and that's what we want to keep associating with the place.
I'm gonna avoid this question because I know that for a couple of those films, you probably guys don't remember any of those films being shot here.
I was born in 1993.
In 1992.
Okay, so Miners Museum or Margaret's Museum came out in '95, and My Bloody Valentine came out in '81.
Yeah, I wasn't alive.
Don't remember that. Okay.
I don't remember for that one either.
You were just barely around for the first one, so don't even start. For filming, duh. Do you think the films captured life in Cape Breton? Why or why not?
You've seen more of the mining ones than I have.
I haven't seen
Okay.
you. This is you, girl.
I find like the mining ones would have more of the aspect of it compared to like My Bloody Valentine because it was a mining community. Like Glace
That's
Bay,
our heritage.
New Waterford, that was mining times.
That's a really good point too, because like we have so many of these Cape Breton films that focus specifically on the mines.
Mining and fishing.
Because it's such a big thing in our heritage, right?
Yeah, here you're related to either coal miner, a fisherman, or a steel plant worker.
Yeah.
And don't worry, guys, I will be editing this, so
Yeah.
don't worry if you misspeak or at all. I
That's
will
fine.
be editing.
That's fine.
Which of these films have you watched that has the most Cape Breton feel to us?
Oh, since you're editing this, Jeff, I'm surprised you didn't mention Forest Ranger.
Oh, I totally forgot about the Legend of the Psychotic Forest Ranger.
You want to add something real quick? Do it now.
Yeah, Legend of the Psychotic Forest Ranger. Definitely Cape Breton. Totally. Not just because I knew like 3/4 of the cast.
Okay, cool.
All 4 cast members. I've never
Okay,
There's
so
like 8.
Go ahead with the question again.
okay,
Sorry.
so I'm gonna ask you the last question. Do you think there's hope for the Cape Breton film industry?
Definitely.
I hope so.
I definitely do. I think the culture has progressed enough where we still have those, like, uniquely Cape Breton things. And if you think about people who've started YouTube channels and all the TikToks that are specifically about Cape Breton humor and humor that only makes sense to us, it means that we can provide something that other places can't, and therefore we have something to build off of. So I do think that there is a chance that this can be something in the future.
Thanks, guys.
I hope you enjoyed my project, and here is me leaving the island. Bye!